Welcome to another episode of Tea Time at PhysioX, and today we have a special guest, Shazie Senen. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you actually said it perfectly. See, I feel like I could never change my name because it sounds nice.
It sounds.
It's like
It
a
just
podcast,
rolls.
podcast
It
guest
just rolls
name.
on so well. All right. So Shazie's an EFT practitioner, and we'll explain what that is in just a moment. She will be at PhysioX next Thursday, November 16th at 6:30 to host a class exclusive for our PhysioX members and community. So hope to see you guys there, and we can do this whole thing with Shazie.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, what is EFT?
So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, and basically what it means is that you are, tapping on a different meridian point. So it's based off like the acupressure points in your body. So you're tapping upon different parts of your face, your body, and it basically just disrupts the energetic flow in your body. So you know how, like, not to get all super sciencey, but you know how sometimes like the signals are being sent to your brain and you have like neural pathways, and so when you're tapping upon the different points, which is like this point or your head or your eyebrow, it basically disrupts the energetic flow and it re-signals to your brain to kind of break the neural pathways and create new ones. So, for example, if I'm feeling stressed out and I'm feeling, sometimes you feel it literally in your body and you want to release it, tapping upon the points helps disrupt that flow and helps sends a new message to your brain like, hey, you're not feeling fine, you're feeling imbalanced, and so it's time to disrupt that and create new pathways. That way you feel better.
Now, when you say meridians, that's more like Eastern
Yes,
type medicine,
it
right?
is, yes.
So, I mean, how did you get into that realm to begin with?
Yeah, so I think, honestly, like Western medicine wasn't working out for me. It's very, obviously I've tried it all. And so originally how I got into EFT was just me going through, what I went through in my past, and I was just trying to like reframe how I saw things. So I have a lot of like conditioned old thoughts and beliefs about myself, whether it's my low confidence levels, based on like, my poverty levels growing up, or like living in domestic violence shelters and, relying on government food stamps and just, having a single mother, for example. All those, things really played a role in my upbringing, and so it affected how I saw myself, how I acted with people. And so I had very like low confidence levels, high stress levels, very overachieving. So I feel like I needed to overcompensate for, thinking that I was, having lack of, so not feeling like I was good enough. And so, I went to, therapy, and it was fine. It worked out. But then I also started seeing like, people always hear, always say, hey, like work on affirmations, yada, yada. But it's very surface level to me, just saying like, if I look in the mirror and say like, I'm great, I'm smart, I'm confident. I feel like
I always feel awkward doing stuff like that.
It is awkward because then you're just like, oh, like, hey, like you're great. But like, you don't actually believe it. You're just saying the words and you're hoping that maybe one day you believe it. Which, it's a good start for like, anyone to start practicing being kind to himself. It's always a good idea. But I think for me, it was like, my brain didn't believe it. And so my body was still stuck in the same state that I was previously. So like, if I'm saying I'm feeling great, I'm confident, but my body literally felt the same way when I was not feeling confident, for example, my brain won't get the memo. Like I feel like you have to give your brain sort of like a roadmap, like a GPS signal, like, hey, like, just so you know, like we are changing how we feel about ourselves.
You have to believe it. If
if
you don't believe it, the nervous system's really not going to want to create any changes, because it's like, well, I know you're lying. So.
Yeah, literally, like, I know you're lying, so why are you telling me? So I did that for the longest, like, I'm great, I'm smart, like, this is great. But I didn't believe it, even though I tried so hard to believe it. And so I found EFT. I'm not even sure how I stumbled upon it. I think I was just like Googling random things to like try and get into, how like you sometimes Google new techniques. And so I found EFT on YouTube, and I was really intrigued. So I started tapping on different things, and my mom and I did it together. So my mom has a lot of like chronic pain, for example. And so mine was more, how I felt about myself, but my mom did it more for her chronic pain and her stress and a lot of stored emotions and like, pain that she was feeling based on her past. And so we did it together. It was a really nice, like, bonding moment, I want to say, to kind of like do it together. And at first it was kind of weird. Like, my mom has always been into Eastern medicine. She would always go, like, growing up in LA, we would go to Chinatown. She would drink like any like herbal teas and drinks. And I used to judge her. I'm like, Mom, like, how does drinking this make you feel better? Like just me being judgy in the beginning. But she was always been like super into Eastern medicine. That's her vibe. And every solution that I was looking for help with, she would just give me like Eastern medicine solutions. And so doing EFT tapping was really great because I feel like, it it was based on like the acupressure points, the meridian points, like you mentioned, very Eastern medicine.
So it's a nice entryway for her because it was already
Yes.
stuff that she believes in, and
Yes.
now it's just all right. Let me just kind of push you a
Yes.
little bit into this realm. Okay.
Yes, and for
All right.
me, it was new because I was, more, I guess because like, I grew up here in the US and my mom grew up in Singapore, so I could get why she was very like, Western medicine doesn't work, like, which I know is like, but she tried it, and I think she's very pro like Eastern medicine. And so for me, I did it and I was very intrigued. I'm like, oh, mom, I get it. Like, I see that you are, you're getting somewhere here. And so I got into it. And then I started, tapping for myself, and my mom did it too. And so then I saw the changes, because it helps, for me at least, it was more subconscious reprogramming, right? Like it's just, again, your body is now believing the things that you are saying because you're tapping on the different points. You are creating that mind-body connection. And I think initially I was very just like mind only, like without the body part. And so working on the mindset component, for example, I was just lacking in like the body component of like the changes that I wanted to, create.
Right. Was there like a moment in which you just kind of found like, all right, this actually works? Was there like a defining moment in there?
For me, it was how I started showing up in the real world. So I started being, for example, the reason why I got into tapping was because I, had to deal with a lot of like verbal abuse growing up with my stepdad. And it led to me not being like confident, and not just confidence levels, but I was just so like, I was doubting myself so much that I wasn't getting like, like job interviews. You could tell that I couldn't even sell myself, right, in job interviews. And then, the friendships that I had, the people that I was dating, you could kind of see that I was just like going, like I just had really low standards for myself, basically. And I didn't believe in myself and like my worth. And so my little aha moment was when I started seeing a shift in how I treated myself and who I allowed in my life, and who, like how I showed up in job interviews, how I showed up in relationships and friendships. And that led to me, again, like moving across the country to Boston, for example. It just like made me feel like I could do things. And it was just like a little aha moment that I was like, oh, wow, like this actually works. Like doing tapping, like a few minutes every single day. You don't have to do, full long tapping sessions every day. But for me, it was just like, it became more of my routine. And I started sort of reshifting how I thought about myself. And then it kind of, I think it showed with, with the people that I was with.
So you are doing the tapping, and also you are putting your mind into a certain kind of setting. Like what is going on in the thought process while you're doing it, or is it just more like just physical?
Yeah. So initially, when I started my tapping rounds, because you always have to like do a few sessions, and so initially I was like, okay, I don't even know if it's working. And so for me, I felt the emotional release, and I think, for example, initially when I got into tapping, I was doing it for, my self-esteem, my confidence, my stress levels. But I think tapping really helps you bring out emotions that you didn't know were there. So I didn't know that I had stored emotions from my past about like my upbringing and like feelings of like resenting. For example, like my mom, for example, I had some resentment because, we moved to LA and from Singapore, and I didn't have a say in it, stuff like that. And I think just tapping on those things helped me realize the real like root cause of why I was feeling a certain way about myself and how I was interacting with other people. And then I think just me coming up with those new emotions helped me release them, which was helpful because I was like, wow, I didn't even know that I was, feeling a certain way about this. I thought I was tapping because I was feeling, like I was feeling doubtful about myself and so forth. So I think just like the tapping component, even if you're not saying the words, just tapping and focusing on what you want to focus on, just helps you kind of tap out the feelings that you're feeling.
Now, are there moments in which you are tapping and you just become very emotional?
Yeah, I tapping tends to like bring out a lot out of you energetically. So for me, like I think there was a moment where I just started crying. I wasn't even sure why I was crying, and I think just like realizing that I was tapping on like so much that was built up inside. And the same goes for my mom. I think my mom definitely carries a lot more than I do, and she was just crying. And so tapping tends to be emotional because you, again, like you find out things that you didn't even know were there, or like things that you thought you were fine. Like for example, like some people might feel like, oh, I moved on from that, like I'm no longer upset about it. But if you're tapping on certain things, it could remind you like, hey, you didn't actually process that emotion. So it really helps you sort of process how you're feeling, I want to say. And just like the emotional processing, I think sometimes we tend to pent up a lot of emotions and store them away. I think we're not really all great or knowledgeable at processing a lot of things.
course.
And so that allows you to just like pause and be like, let's
Yeah.
process.
And I would add that
Yeah.
that kind of processing happens in the physical body too.
Yes.
The physical body will recognize the emotional trauma that you had gone
Yes.
through
Yeah.
for your whole life, even as
Yeah.
a child, up until now.
Yeah.
The stress that you carry, the tightness that you carry, there are ways that we connect that all the way back to some of the emotional things that we're trying to hide away.
Yes.
But we have to deal with it somehow,
Yes.
whether it is directly or indirectly. It just shows up in ways that we don't expect.
Yep.
And I find this to be true for some of the clients that we see, that when there is a shift in the mental, there was also a shift in the physical
Yes.
at the same time. Did you find that?
I definitely feel like there's like the mind body connection is so real, which is why I feel like you can't really do one without the other. And so I love that like you need to like connect the two and have that connection. So like, when my mom was doing tapping, for example, she thought she had a lot of like physical, felt physical pain. And of course there is some felt pain, but I think a lot of it was more emotional that, like we mentioned, like the emotions could show up as pain in our body. And so when she was tapping, she was able to release a lot of that and kind of, lessen the pain that she was feeling, the felt pain.
Oh, so she physically felt
Yes,
less pain.
my mom was more physical, yeah, because she had, migraines all the time. She had back pain, and she went to doctors, and no one could figure out why. Like, she went through X-rays and all of that, and we were trying to figure out, like, okay, like, to me, I'm like, okay, what is wrong? Like, Mom, are you like just faking this? Like, sometimes I'm like, what are you doing? And so it turns out that she just had emotions. Like, I think they would just like stored stress and tightness, like you mentioned. It was in her body, and you can't really see it from like, a medical kind of view. But I think just like doing things like that help her release the tightness and the stored emotions that are like literally stored in her body.
That's awesome, because
Yeah.
my mom, I think, suffered from a chronic pain issue in a similar way.
Yeah.
Back pain, migraine, just a lot. She's still dealing with some health issues.
Okay, yeah.
But as a physical therapist trying to help her, I was looking at it from a very physical standpoint in the
Right.
beginning, and it just fell flat. Like everything
Yeah.
we did never really worked.
Yes.
Things didn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And then some days we got into talking, and we talked about like, what was work like? What was it like raising me as a child? And she mentioned how she was working in a factory and she didn't know a word of English, and she would get yelled at to work faster. And there's
Yeah.
this, I can't imagine having such negative energy directed at you, and you
Yeah.
can't talk back.
I know, yeah.
Because of the language and
Yes.
because of the power displacement.
Yeah.
And she had to carry that for years.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't surprise me that someone like that
Right.
would develop such a chronic level of pain and discomfort
Yep.
and disease and illness and such.
I like that.
So-
Yeah, everything. I feel like the lifestyle component, like we learned that, and me having my like public health background, we look at social determinants of health. So we have to look. You can't just like if a patient comes in here and like, hey, I'm not feeling great. You have to like really address the lifestyle as a whole, because every component affects that person's health. It's not just like, okay, well, stop smoking. It's very like, wait, why are you smoking? How, all of that components kind of thing. So I like that you mentioned like looking at the lifestyle, because I feel like everything like affects how you are, not just like in that moment, but like your upbringing, who you're with, how, where you work, who you're interacting with, all of those components of like where you live, all of that.
Yeah, well, in Western medicine, they're really looking at just the physical,
Yeah.
and they're not really taking into consideration that connection that it has to the rest of the life that we live.
Yeah.
So the person is kind of taken out, and we're just looking at just the physical body.
Yeah.
And I find that never really worked well for most people, especially if you have any kind of chronic issue that you've been dealing with for years.
Yeah.
So love to hear about that. But I do want to talk a little bit more about just you leading classes now, because
Yes.
you were doing it for yourself, and then eventually you started leading classes in which you were facilitating these EFT moments for other people.
Yeah.
What was that like? How did that start?
Yeah, so I got into that, I want to say like a couple years ago, because I saw a change for myself. And so I was like, okay, like I love what he's doing, because, I was doing it with my mom, and then eventually my sister. And then so I started just like, thank you. I started just, sharing it with people. And I think it became like a natural thing to be like, I love tapping. Like I want, everyone to try it. I just feel like it's so simple, yet so powerful. And I love that it's like accessible, because anyone could do it anywhere. You're tapping on the points and you could feel some sort of relief in that moment. And so I started sharing it with people. I didn't really know like I could even like lead classes or anything. I was just kind of like I love it. Like, let's share. Like, I would just share it just as a conversational starter kind of thing. And so how I got into it was I looked up sort of like certification. That way I could actually, understand it more, understand the science of it. And so I, got my certification. I did, continue what I was doing because I think I just basically was doing the same thing, but just had more of a foundation to share. And so how I led was, I originally started as a virtual space, 2020, that was like a virtual time and oh my God, throwback. But now, I'm doing it more in person and that was a different experience for me because, being like the facilitator, I know like, oh, I'm holding space for others now. Like it was very interesting. And so I kind of like accidentally got into it, I want to say, from like talking about it so much that I was like, oh, let me just share it. And so now like in the Boston space or like greater Boston area, I would just, start hosting like events and workshops. And I think my first like in-person one was just me opening an event for like business owners, like women business owners in Boston. And I just like, how people start an event with like guided meditation. So like they wanted to do a little spin on it. And so I did a tapping session for that. Just tapping in, like, being a woman business owner, for example, it comes with a lot of doubts. And when it's tapping, all the abundance and affirmations and just the confidence levels and releasing doubts and fears about being business owners. And so that just kind of like led to all the things that I started doing. Because honestly, the way I got that was I just asked like, hey, can I lead a tapping session? And the person was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, oh, we're doing it. Like, it was very...
That's how we're doing it.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I think it's just like...
We're bringing it here.
Yes, and I think like tapping led to me like just asking for things. I'm like, the worst that could happen is that they say no, and that's fine. Like, I'm just going to start asking. So now I just start in the habit of like, hey, like I would love to do this for you and all of that.
It almost feels like you got into tapping to boost your self-confidence, and through that you went to facilitating, and through facilitating you have to be a little more confident to approach people. So it's almost like it became almost like a very real vehicle in itself, as well as something that's a little bit deeper down that you grab onto. Yeah, I love it. It just you just kind of like you have different layers. Of how it
that's true.
you.
It's so layered. Wow.
Yeah. And how many people do you normally see in like a given class?
It depends. So, I've done large groups, but I think for those is more of a me leading it, but there's no room for like conversation and all of that.
Okay, so there is conversation. There is like it's like a collaborative.
Collaborative, yeah. If it's like a smaller group, I'll make it collaborative. So that would be like maybe 10 to 12 people, just to like have that, like, hey, like what are we all feeling? I like to like gauge the room and ask people like what they're feeling today, how they're feeling, and what they want to release. That way it's a group feeling, and I'm not just like saying words that don't make sense to people, because I also want to get the language. I think this is an important part of EFT, is that like if I'm tapping and I'm saying like big fancy words or whatever that no one is using or no one's ever said in their life, the tapping wouldn't really work, because it has to be like the language that your brain is used to. So what I love about having those intimate groups is like, let me like jot down a few words that you all are feeling, how are you feeling? And I get to hear the language that people are using. Like for example, if I'm using the word abundance and no one has ever said that in their life, it wouldn't really resonate with their brain. Like,
I 100% agree with that, because I have been in, not therapy, but in group sessions in which they're saying these things. I'm like, I have never used that word. I barely know what it means.
Right.
And I can't internalize.
Yes, the internalization,
of what's actually happening. And language is so important. Even with people dealing with pain, people who come see us for physical therapy, is like they say something like, well, I know I'm gonna have to live with this for the rest of my life. Oh, I got like this bone on bone situation going on. Or I got an MRI of an 80-year-old. And these are languages that we tell other people, but also we tell ourselves. And what we tell ourselves are so important, because that can manifest itself into like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I love that you mentioned that language is important, and we should be careful about how we say things, or say things that people actually will resonate with.
Yes, I agree. And that's why I love the intimate groups, because then I get to hear what people are using, what words make sense to them, like what we want to work on as a group. And so I like that, the intimate groups, because that way it's more of a collaborative effort here. But the large groups are fine too, but it's just harder to gauge like what people are using. So I would use just more general language, and it's a great starter. But I think the intimate groups is when people could feel the like transformation, and it's very effective.
What were some like, I guess, case studies or examples where you're in like a group setting and someone in the group have just this profound effect? Do you see
Yeah,
that happening?
I saw that recently, and it was a collaboration I did with like a Pilates studio, and it was a very intimate group. It was 5 people, and I loved it because it was. I didn't really know how it would be. I'm like, it was 5 people. It's pretty small, but when I went and showed up, and I did the whole, I started off with the journaling session. That way, people could process how they're feeling, and then they shared. And then when I was tapping, I did a few rounds, and it was great. But then when I got to the 4th round, and I was like, okay, everyone just like really focus on the problem that you want to, what you want to get rid of. And then I just see people crying. And I was like, oh, people are like all 5 of them were all in tears. And so it was like an actual physical shift for them. And they were like, I didn't even know I was feeling this much stress or this much emotions about like what we're talking about. And so when I saw that they were crying, I made space for them, obviously. And then I think for the next round, I said no words. I was like, let's just tap. And so that was like a really great moment because, I was leading them through the tapping session. And it was like everyone got to focus and close their eyes and just focus on what they want to release. And I think that was such an emotional moment for them to just like focus in on how they're really feeling, not having to focus on saying the words sometimes. And they were just able to just release. And so I think that was like a moment I saw where I'm like, wow, like everyone here is crying. And like, it was just like, oh, like, what do I do now? Because I'm like, oh my God, people are crying. But it was a good thing to just like release.
It's a good thing. It's kind of almost maybe what you want.
Yeah.
In a session. It's for people to have this ability to just let that shit out.
Yeah.
People are just
Seriously.
holding it all in and to let that release. I'm sure that was a fantastic experience for people.
It was like, I
inside
will
that
never
class.
forget it. I'm like, I still like talk about it to this day because I'm like, that was like probably the most like powerful, impactful like group that I had as far as like the vibes and like seeing the shift. And so that was it was life changing for me actually. I was like, wow, I'm gonna write about this and like remember this forever.
Absolutely. And I think there's something special that happens when you have a group of people, whether it's big or small, and they come together and they share a similar intention for something.
Yes.
And at like a more superficial level, it's like going to a concert
Yeah.
and listen to your favorite music, and then you look at the crowd of everyone who are fans of this person, and you guys are on the same energy wavelength because you guys are just feeling the same feeling, like how this beat just resonates in the body and the way it beats. I love live music for that reason. I love music because music makes you feel.
Yeah, music does make you feel. Oh
Yeah.
my God, that's a good analogy about like the concert stuff. Because I feel like when I went to like back in the day, like like EDM type of concerts.
I'm still going to those. Yeah, I'm still up in there. I was at a show on the Halloween.
Oh my God. Okay, because I was like, oh, I did that, But I feel like people are like,
Oh,
oh,
no,
you did
I
that. No, I could see you doing it
I
actually.
was very much in the scene, like very close in the scene. Went to festivals.
Oh my God, I went to festivals. Yeah, like in Vegas, like EDC and stuff, and like.
We camped out Bonnaroo. Did like
Oh my God,
4
good
Bonnaroos.
times.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, good times. And like, how people actually feel it. And you're like trading like bracelets or whatever. And it was just like a cute community, like
It's community,
vibes.
it's connection. I think it's all part of being human.
Yes.
Humans thrive by being with other humans.
Yes.
And there was this one thing I did. You know what Wim Hof is?
No.
Okay, so Wim Hof, I won't go into a whole tangent here, but he had this breathing technique. I was over in California for the first time, and I was with my roommate, Justin Turner. Shout out to Justin if you're watching this. And I will never forget this because it was a Sunday, and he goes, "Hey, you want to come over and we're gonna breathe and we're gonna do like a cold plunge." I was like, "Man, it
Cold
sounds."
plunge. Oh my God, I love that. Okay.
I'm like, that sounds about the most California thing I could think of. So I went over there. We were in this random guy's place, and we were all lying down, a bunch of us, and there's an instructor, and he's leading us through breathing, and we're doing things like, just sinking the breath. And something about sinking the breath, at some point it feels like I'm not breathing, it's just doing it on its own, it's automatic.
Right.
And then we all did it, and then by the time we're done, we look at each other and we're all smiley, and then we all went into the cold plunge. And what was fascinating for me is that all the people who had done the breathing, they go into the cold and they're not feeling the cold the same way.
Oh wow.
They're much more resistant. Like when I was in there, I was with my hands together and I was in that cold water. It was 3 minutes, and I swear I could go on for much longer. But I got out of respect for the people that need to get in, right?
Right.
But yeah, just that was probably my my most powerful like group experience
Yeah.
besides music.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow. That sounds amazing. I know I want to do that.
Yeah.
I gotta go to California.
Yo, no, we're gonna try to bring some people here.
Yeah.
Not the Coldplay, but maybe the breathing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love breath work too. I do. I know a few people who like actually lead the breathwork sessions in Boston, so I like go to those events. Yeah.
Well,
I'll
we gotta
connect you
get.
for the next one. I'll be there too.
I want them sitting right here, and we won't even talk. We'll just breathe.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
All right. Very good.
Great.
So Thursday,
Yep.
November
16.
16th. I'm so bad with dates. November 16th, 6:30 at PhysioX. Shazie will be here. She'll be leading a tapping class. I would love everyone to join, but you do have to sign up in advance because there is a limited amount of spots. Okay, don't miss it. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy
I love
your
the tea. Thank you. Yeah. It's really great tea.
All right, catch you in the next one.
Okay.